Bounce off. Recording. Real, yo. But that's just one thing I want to say. The real, yo. But those who down for the next round, that's just one thing I want to say. The real, yo. But those who down for the next round, that's just one thing I want to say. The real, yo. But those who down for the next round, that's just one thing I want to say. Peace and blessings. I go by the divine name Superior K-Wise, Bold Son of Allah, aka DJ K-Wise. I'd like to welcome you to another session of Real to Real 360. I'm the co-host, but right now I'm about to introduce my host, who's one of my brothers in God. I love him divinely so much. So right about now, I'm gonna present the others and introduce to those who may know. Joshua Allah, aka PhD. Joshua Allah, come aboard, my brother.
Yo, peace. I'm coming in on you fast right here. Coming on you fast right here. Yo, I want to say peace to all the gods and nerds. We having Children's Day today. You know what I mean? So today is a real magnetic day for the nation of gods and nerds who lost 5%. But also, too, you know, I want to give a shout out, you know what I'm saying, to Brown Seed and the God Josh Shem with the Air Like Apparel and they food square out in Danville, Virginia. You know, they always add on to the God shows and stuff like that, due to knowledge and everything else. So I want to make sure that they know and understand that when you down in Danville, Virginia, you get your air-like apparel and your food at the square with the God. Peace. But today,
peace.
We're going to definitely, it's going to be a magnetic show. We have a great, like I said before, humanitarian. We bring on individuals who impact the community. Not just, you know what I'm saying, in their local cipher, but the things that they do touch at home and abroad. This brother right here that I'm about to bring on is my brother, man. I got mad love for him. He's a father, he's a writer, you know what I'm saying? He's an educator, he's an MC, he's an activist. He got so many hats, man, it's hard to explain. I want y'all to, you know what I'm saying, give it up for my brother Saldin, Quinal Law. Please come on in here, man, and let the people know who you are.
Peace, guys. How y'all doing today?
Peace to the God.
Peace to the God, man. Yo, man, it's a blessing. It's a blessing to have you on, God. Like I said, we always have conversations on different topics. But today, I want the people that view our show to see you and hear from you, because it's like magnetic when you sit there and you say Saldin name. Everybody knows it from the YouTube and things of that nature, but they don't know exactly who the man is. You know what I'm saying? The man behind the YouTube, the Atlantis Bills and things of that nature. So could you give them a brief overview of who you are, you know what I'm saying, where you from, how, you know what I'm saying, you got this knowledge and everything else?
Oh, man, I appreciate both of y'all. I appreciate y'all having this platform, too. I see my brother Salim on here as well. And it's good to be in good company with my brothers that are doing the work and not just doing a bunch of talking. You know what I mean? One thing that I always tell people when it comes to knowledge of self, my journey really started when my consciousness was incarnated in my form. Before I actually got supreme mathematics, the alphabet, 120, I always have to pay homage to my parents because they laid the proper foundation for me in order for me to be a critical thinker and receptive to wanting to learn other things about not only my ancestors, but also things about myself. So I always start there in terms of my family dynamics, because that's important. You know, my old earth, she's a social psychologist, and my old dad, he was a tradesman, but he also collected African artifacts, and they were both affiliated with the Black Panther Party. So I grew up culturally and socially conscious. I didn't grow up in like a religious household or anything like that. It was more cultural and socially conscious. And that laid the proper groundwork for me to be open to learning other aspects of myself that took me from that particular point in my growth and development to being able to gain knowledge of self. And I got knowledge of self in Born Power when I was in college. I was enrolled at Wilberforce at Central State University. I actually got a scholarship to go there to play football. So I played college football, Division I NAIA. And that was an experience in itself, you know. And I met my enlightener, Raheem, a lot when I was in college. And that was an experience. And one thing that I learned very quickly is not everyone gets knowledge of self in the same setting or under the same circumstances. I happen to be in an academic environment, and that's the way that I got knowledge of self. I didn't get it on the block, or I didn't get it in a juvenile detention center, or I didn't get it in other different places that other people got it. And I'm thankful that Umala took that step years ago in terms of taking knowledge of self and expanding it to, in a sense where he was able to take it to a college environment. And from there, you started to see other gods and earths getting to the point where they're going into higher education. And that's what ultimately made it possible for someone like me to get knowledge of self, because that is a part of my trajectory. So Raheem, he got educated by a guy by the name of Life Justice, who's from North Philly, Power Hill. Life Justice got knowledge of self when he was at the Art Institute in Now Why. And he had an experience where he got educated by two brothers, a brother named Master Allah and another brother named Ahad Knowledge Born, who were taught by Divine Prince. Now, anybody that knows who Divine Prince is, he's always active and involved in anything that's going on at the root. He's the tall brother that's always involved. Divine Prince
out the desert.
He was taught by his right-hand man, Justice Hakim.
Yeah.
So Justice Hakim was taught by Minister Larmi, and Minister Larmi was taught by Yahuru, who was ultimately taught by Allah. And that's just one branch in terms of how I got knowledge of self. On the other side, Life Justice, his education was furthered by a God named I Freedom Born. I Freedom Born was taught by a God named Jaru. Jaru was taught by a God named Black God. Black God was taught by another God named Knowledge Allah, whose also his name was Dahu, who was taught by Black Messiah. So I have those two roots in terms of where I actually get my lineage from. And it's important to be able to know chronologically where you got knowledge of self from in terms of knowing where your foundation is. But what's equally important is what you're actually doing with it, because you're carrying on a legacy of those that came before you. And, you know, that's also equally important, you know? So that's the short of it in terms of, you know, my chronology in terms of getting knowledge of self. And one thing I always tell people as well is my family were always involved in youth advocacy and community outreach. That's how I grew up. You know, my old earth, like I mentioned, she's a social psychologist, but she also was a director of a youth center in this city. And both of my parents always found a way to be father and mother figures to children in the community by helping offer them employment, opening their doors to them, and just making sure that they were a part of that community extended beyond just our nuclear family. And when I got exposed to knowledge of self, got exposed to it through basically hip hop, you know, late 80s, and listening to Poor Righteous Teachers and Brand Nubian and Rakim and a lot of these other artists that were dropping either direct phrases of lessons within their music or just dropping Jews in their lesson. That was always attractive to me. But then when I started to learn about the principles and the values of the culture, what was most attractive to me is learning about how the father was a youth advocate and he was involved in community outreach. It wasn't brothers, you know, speaking on high science and using $50 words, because my old earth used $50 words because she had a DSM-4 in the house. You know what I'm saying? So that shit ain't impressed me. What impressed me is somebody taking the initiative to go out in this community and teach these youth, because that's what my old earth and my old dad was already doing. So I knew the value and the importance of that. And learning about the different sciences of life in terms of who I actually was, and having a greater insight into our connection to our classical and first world civilizations, that even took how I was already growing to a whole different level. So when I started to learn and study in college, and I would come back home and be building with my parents, they weren't really surprised at anything like that. So it wasn't like I was doing something that was the total antithesis of what we was doing in our household. You know, it was a little different from what they were teaching, but they embraced it because they saw that this was something that built upon the foundation that they already laid for me.
Right,
So,
right.
you know, so that's like the short of it. You know what I mean?
Well,
But
you know, that right there is to sum it up, because, you know, when you said Divine Prince and my educated knowledge born both came out the desert together. You know what I mean? So I have a real personal relationship with Divine Prince. Basically grew up under him, you know. So definitely that's a strong tree. That's a strong backing to give your foundation to stepping out into the community. Man,
yeah,
you know,
yeah.
when he got back to Niagara Falls, and was there a cipher there? Was there something that kept you motivated, or did you have to travel abroad to meet other brothers and sisters?
Yeah, so in Niagara Falls, where I reside, I'm literally right on the border to Canada in Western New York. And when I got back up here, I had to really find people that had knowledge of self. And one thing that I started to learn is usually the people that I would come in contact with were either brothers and sisters who left from Now Why and went to college down in this area, or they might have been brothers, rarely sisters, but brothers that might have been incarcerated up here, upstate. And once they got released, they just settled in this area. So I would start coming in contact with different brothers and sisters under those circumstances. But then I started to come in contact with brothers and sisters over on the Canadian side. And that was something that was a blessing in a sense, where this idea of all the human families of the planet Earth, that shit was never theoretical to me, because I grew up knowing brothers that had ancestry from the Philippines, from China, from Syria, Lebanon, Ethiopia, Jamaica, Trinidad, Tobago, Ghana, Nigeria, all of these places, brothers and sisters get knowledge of self that really represents all the human families of the planet Earth. So there's brothers and sisters that I've known all of my life. And like I said, I got knowledge back in Born Power from around that time all the way to today that I'm still connected with in terms of universal family that's on the Canadian side. Also, there's brothers that I met, like a god named Divine, another god named Naheem, who were educated by a brother named Taekwon Allah, who got educated by Firstborn Prince. I met Taekwon when he was up here in this area going to Buff State College. And he taught Naheem and Divine. And that's a relationship that I've had. And they live in Buffalo, aka Bethlehem. So I really had to take initiative to connect with those who were in the environment. And there weren't a lot of ciphers and stuff like that that were actually going on. And once I started to connect with brothers and sisters, one thing I also learned is when you are that far from the root, either you are going to be strong or you're going to be weak. Either you're going to be amongst the 85 and that's how you're going to just live it and kind of like cloak your lifestyle or your culture by being amongst the 85, or you going to set a standard where you live at in terms of teaching those who are around you, you know? So the beautiful thing about it is most of the brothers and sisters that I know that's up in this area are solid and they're self-motivated. You know, they're not just relying on somebody else to do something or to get together. Nah, they're living this out each and every way and each and every day. And that's ultimately how we get down just in this particular region itself.
Indeed. Now, what was your motivating factor to get you to start your Atlantis Bill School? Because everybody sees the YouTube with the animations and everything else. Motivated you to go ahead and start utilizing the animations, because you use a lot of the animations with the lessons and with different jewels, and then YouTube, you would see you building on different topics. What was
Hmm.
what was your motivation to just go ahead and initiate striving to get the school together?
Man, it's like you look at the knowledge understanding degree in the 140s, but brings rain, hail, snow, and earthquakes. And the first part of that lesson is they continue daily, right? In terms of what the 10% teaches to keep the 85% blind, deaf, and dumb, and using their labor to enrich themselves. And just growing up and seeing the type of propaganda that's been out there in regards to who we are not, it's always been important to me to be able to represent who we are in any capacity that I can to make sure that I counter that narrative. So I'm always looking for ways that I can further and push this culture forward and never be satisfied with what it is that I've done. You know, it's like if I publish a book today, I'm already halfway in another book that I'm publishing.
Mm.
I don't just sit and be satisfied with something that I actually did. I'm always striving to figure out, man, what can I do? And what is a lane or platform that we're not using as a nation and as a people in order to make sure that we have content that's out here for not only our children, but all children to have an opportunity to grow and develop. And, you know, I'm always striving to challenge myself creatively. Like, what can I learn how to do next? Like during the time of the pandemic, I taught myself how to file a provisional and a utility patent, as well as to do trademarking and stuff like that. That's just something that I wanted to learn how to do. So I just disciplined myself in order to learn how to do those things. And it's the exact same way with the animation or writing books or anything that I do. I'm always doing it with the intention of creating a platform to push our culture forward and to make sure that that narrative is positive and a productive example of who we actually are. So looking at that knowledge and understanding degree, I also realize that if we are not in a position of mastering our narrative, then we're going to continue to be mastered by people.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
I got
Now,
a question. I just want to know, first of all, where did the concept strike you to say Atlantis build? Let's get to that. Let's make knowledge one how that can be.
right.
You know
right.
what? My I have an older sister. She's like about a year apart from me, and we're real close. And like years ago, right when YouTube first started, she had sent me a camera because she was working for this company, and it was something that they just gave her, and she sent it to me, and I just had thoughts that I wanted to share just about certain things, and it was never with an intention to be like, yo, I'm doing it with this particular vision in terms of 5 or 10 years out. It was just, let me use this to strive to share just thoughts or things that I think is important for people to know. And I just started to create just videos just based on being inspired and wanting to empower people and educate people. And I call the city of Niagara Falls Atlantis because it's the city of water, right? And I was building. So I just said, Atlantis build. You know, it wasn't even really nothing deep about it. It was just, you know, over time, it became a hashtag connected to the things that I do. And one thing that's unique is you'll notice that I never put my name on stuff. I may connect my name to certain things just for chronological purposes to keep things in order or perspective. But other than that, I always put the things that I'm doing first because it's not about me personally. So I don't have no saladinallah.com. You know what I'm saying? Because
Right.
it's all about the work that I'm actually doing, because when I'm no longer physically here, that's going to be something that stands a test of time, you know? So yeah, that's basically
I was looking at it. I was looking at it like my cars are. I said, oh, he got to be going back in the days with Submariner and you know, in the Aquaman to it. You know what I mean? Because I like really when you talk about the city of Atlantis, it's the lost city. So now,
yep,
most of us had no idea about now, up in Buffalo and in Niagara Falls too much about. So I'm looking at it like, he said, Landisville. I said, oh, he must be bringing back like the Lost City. He must be bringing it to the truth and bringing it out. I'm like, because he felt, I said, all right, that was peace right there. So that's how I related. I said, I
Yep.
gotta ask him. Gotta ask him.
Yep. You writing exact. That's exactly what I was thinking of too. Because this is a lost city in that sense. So yeah, I thought about it like that, and then that's also just been the theme of a lot of things that I do. Whether it's projects, programs, and initiatives, or anything else, it's always Atlantis.
I have a quick when it came down to the school itself, what kind of curriculum is you setting up for the babies to come to the school? Because when you speak on it, you always say it's for the gifted, So it's like, okay, what type of programs are we gonna have for these gifted young men and women as we go into your school?
Yeah. So my background is early childhood education.
Mhm.
And that's teaching like preschool age. And the reason why I got into that is because that's one of the most critical stages in terms of our growth and development. It's our formative years. When you look at the wisdom degree in our 1 to 40s, and it talks about Yakub being 6 years old. 6 is a critical point in our growth and development because you're at a stage where your brain is about 90% developed at that time. So everything that you've been exposed to from your consciousness being incarnated in that form up to 6 years old, you're really seeing a manifestation of a determined idea. And I wanted to get involved in that part of children's growth and development, not just ours, but just children, period. And being in that space, I have the opportunity to start them off on a proper trajectory when it comes to brain development. And it's some high science shit, you know what I mean? And usually when you look at early childhood development, you don't see Black men working within that field. I look like a Black unicorn. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's usually middle-aged or young white women that are teaching early childhood development. And I'm sure there's certain things that they teach children at that stage in their growth and development that's important, but usually they lack cultural competence. There's things that they're not exposing all children to, especially our children to, that we only have the capacity to teach. So I taught pre-K for about 4 years, and then over the last few years, I transitioned into teaching 6th grade in my district. But when I was teaching pre-K, I'll be teaching them supreme mathematics. You know what I'm saying? I'll be bringing in different type of foods, introducing them to foods that they just didn't know anything about. Like pre-K students, some of them never even seen a mango before. So I would bring in mango so they could try it, expose them to certain things. Because when you're dealing with children that come from an environment where there's like a chronic scarcity of resources and they may not have certain access or opportunities, you have to bring those type of opportunities to them. If they can't travel, you have to bring resources and opportunities to them so that they can travel within the mind. Right. So I would be doing things like we would have exercise time every morning. I would teach them yoga, children's yoga. During nap time, I'll be playing shit like Tribe Called Quest, John Coltrane, Alice Coltrane. I'll be exposing them to things because at that point in their growth and development, it's mostly about social emotional. It's about the relationships that you establish. Right. And as children, all children are born gifted in some capacity, all of them. But a lot of times as they get older, as adults, we may not invest the time to help cultivate those gifts and the things that they may not be gifted in, to bring some support so that they can have a level of equality with the things that they do natural or that they're gifted in. Most times people look at children and they just say, well, they can't do certain things, right? Or they're just good in this, so they may not strive to help them develop in other areas. So I would find out where their strengths are, what they need to be strong in, and start to show them their own capacity. You know, another thing that I would be doing is we don't use the word can't in the class.
Right.
We don't use that. You know, I tell them, instead of saying can't, we say, I have not learned yet. That's how we deal with it. Not I can't, because when you say you can't, then you're living in your infinite potential. So there's a lot of things in terms of knowledge of self that I incorporate. And the good thing about pre-K is it's not connected to the New York State standards in terms of Common Core, at least not yet. Once you get into kindergarten, first grade, second grade, you have more specific standards in terms of what it is that you need to be teaching your students. But pre-K, you have a lot more flexibility, and you're setting them on a trajectory in terms of their academic career, you know? So I named my particular program the Atlantis School for Gifted Youngsters. And like the guy was saying, in terms of Atlantis, they're gifted because you've ever heard of the phrase indigo children?
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, all children are indigo children in some capacity. All children have gifts. And I wanted to create a program around emphasizing the growth and development of their infinite potential. Because that's how I raised my own children. And that's the exact type of position that I've had teaching youth for over 20 years in terms of working in certain organizations or partnering with different institutions or whatever, just being a father figure to children from pre-K age all the way up to college age. I just wanted to start off as early as possible and to take my experiences and to put it in the form of a curriculum that'll give them the best opportunities in terms of self-actualization, not just getting older, getting a damn job or working for somebody, but who are you? What purpose are you gonna fulfill, or what different purposes are you gonna fulfill to bring more beauty to this world and help repair what a lot of these adults have broken, you know? So yeah, so that was so the curriculum itself, it's a little different than what children would get in a normal preschool program, because I got knowledge of self and I'm not shy about that shit. You know what I mean? A lot of times you have some of us and we kind of like, I don't know. I'm teaching them supreme mathematics. You know what I'm saying?
Is that the reason why you use the animations in your YouTube? Because it's mostly like you're looking to attract the youth with your animations?
Yep. And one thing you notice too is the animations are short and they're done deliberately to facilitate conversation, because I deliberately leave out certain parts, and that is for the parent or the guardian or the educator to have that type of conversation with their children. Because a lot of times, generationally, sometimes people may have challenges with striving to have connections with another generation, or to start dialogue or conversations around certain topics. So it creates sort of like a safe space to be able, to be able to discuss certain things. So for example, I have one that I did recently called Unspeakable, and it's about the Tulsa race massacre. So it's a book that was written by a woman, and I do a story time about that. The purpose of that is not just to expose children to that history, but also to sit down and have a conversation with them. You know, what do you think about this? Or what do you think this means? What do you think that it doesn't mean? Or how do you feel about this? Or how do you think they felt about this? You know, asking those type of open-ended questions in order to learn from one another. You know, so the animations are done for that purpose, to give people resources and content to build on. You know, even if it's something that you don't agree with. You know, Peace, how you doing? Good, G.
Let me
Even,
interrupt real quick for itself. I'm gonna step out for a second. So, John, you're gonna continue, but before I do, I just want to say that this is our infomercial point in time. Everything that you are hearing is being brought to you by our sponsor, Libation Radio Network.
where we bring to you nothing but the truth, the whole truth. So help us God, you know what I mean? And this is what the Real Show 360 is all about. I'm going to step out, gentlemen. I'll be right back. So continue on because I ain't missing a thing. It's being recorded. So whatever I miss, I can always play it back. I got you. We'll be right
Okay,
back.
God. Peace,
All
God.
right, that'll work. Peace, God. Yeah,
Yeah.
just like the God said, this is definitely our infomercial part of it. You know, I want to shout out Air Like Apparel, Food Square, and 323 North Main Street, Danville, Virginia, with regard to Shandalar, which is Brown Seed, and Joshima Law out there in Danville. They're building, and come out there and support the brothers. Now,
Mhm.
back to like when it came down to the Underground Railroad, right? A lot
Mhm.
of people don't know your actual connection with a relative that
Mhm.
part of the Underground Railroad.
Mhm.
If I'm correct on that, um,
True.
could you speak to how that was impactful for you, and was that the reason why that you joined that organization to be the tour guide with that?
Mhm. Yeah. So like I mentioned, my parents have always been culturally and socially conscious. So they always taught us about classical civilization. For example, like every year, um, it was customary for my family to sit down and watch the Shaka Zulu series that was on television.
Right.
It was mandatory viewing to watch the film The Spook That Sat by the Door.
Mm-hmm.
No, we always had a red, black, and green flag in the house. So they were always very deliberate and intentional about exposing us to cultural consciousness and social justice as well. Um, Naturally, growing up, it was always important to know about our ancestry in terms of our direct lineage. And it was just a normal thing for me to know that my third great grandfather was Josiah Henson. And people who are not familiar with Josiah Henson, he was the central figure that Harriet Beecher Stowe used in her famous novel, Uncle Tom's Cabin. So she actually used his narrative or elements of his life to create the character Uncle Tom in that book, which today has been given a negative stigma, but he wasn't a Uncle Tom in a sense of a so-called sellout. That represents a person who's considered uh, what you would call a coon.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? He wasn't anything like that. But yeah, he was born on a plantation in Charles County, Maryland in 1789. Actually on June 15th, the same born day as one of my young queens. And he was enslaved for 41 years of his life until he was sold down the river and ended up making his way back from New Orleans up to Kentucky, where he got sold off to his enslaver's brother's plantation. And in 1830, that's when he took his family, 4 small children and his wife, and made his journey over 600 miles up here to Western New York, where I reside. He crossed over in October of 1830 into Fort Erie, Ontario, Canada. And he eventually moved further north to a place that was called Dawn and successfully established a settlement of freedom seekers called the Dawn Settlement. He also established the British American Institute. He fought in the Black militia during the rebellion of 1837. And he would still come back into the United States in the role of an abolitionist. And that's just part of his story. But Harriet Beecher Stowe, she took elements of his life once she did research and met him in person. And after she wrote Uncle Tom's Cabin, she wrote another book called The Key to Uncle Tom's Cabin, which shows all of her references and research that she did in order to write her novel. And that's when she mentions my third great grandfather by name. So to kind of give you a sense of when he was making his journey, it was 1830. At that time, Harriet Tubman, her name was Araminta. She wasn't even off of the plantation at that time. So he was a forerunner of the Underground Railroad. That network wasn't even fully established yet when he made this journey,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So he was a very strong-willed and courageous person to be able to take his children, his family with him on that journey. So a few generations later, my grandmother was born through his family. in St. Catharines, Ontario, Canada. And that is the same community and settlement that Harriet Tubman's family eventually made it to and lived in. And she moved over here into the United States in 1925. She had 7 children. My father is one of her children. And then my father had 7 children, and I'm one of his children. So part of that story is something that I just knew growing up, you know, and it wasn't anything that was that was kind of like, it was normal to me to know that part of my family, you know, and learning about some of the Underground Railroad history here in my own city, in the area. Once the Underground Railroad Heritage Museum was being established here in Niagara Falls, I got involved in it from the ground floor. And it took over 300 people to get the institution established. I'm just one of those people. Mm-hmm. And the beautiful thing about it is I had a lot of input in terms of how the content was going to be interpreted, as well as the installations and other different aspects of the Heritage Center being established. Because sometimes you may see institutions and they may not have that real authenticity or people involved in it that actually are a part of what it actually is, you know? So I'm thankful to be a part of it in that capacity. And I'm a visitor experience specialist there. I'm also a community liaison. So I do things related to the community in terms of projects, programs, and initiatives connected to Underground Railroad heritage. I do public speaking engagements around the country in regards to the Underground Railroad. Mm-hmm. And then I'm also a project coordinator for a mural art project that is also in the area where our Heritage Center is. So there's a lot of things that I do in regards to that. And it's not work because it's a part of my life, you know, and you know, it's a blessing to be able to provide food, clothing, shelter for myself and my family off of something that I love to do, you know?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
With that, is that how you got involved with the docu-series Enslaved? Because I don't know if like a lot of people know that you part of the Samuel Jackson docu-series Enslaved. Is that how you got involved with BBC or Samuel Jackson contacted you directly for that?
Yup. So it's twofold. So in terms of the platform that I've established over the years, in terms of knowledge of self and being a 5% and being a very public 5%er, like literally coming in the name of Allah.
Right.
I have a very wide reach globally in regards to that, and getting involved with a local institution such as the Niagara Falls Underground Railroad Heritage Center, that has afforded me other opportunities to also connect with different projects, programs, and initiatives. And it has also helped amplify the digital footprint that I already have. So part of it was being connected to the Underground Railroad and being an ascendant, not a descendant, but an ascendant of Josiah Henson, being a forerunner of the Underground Railroad. So part of it is that, but also part of it is production companies doing research and seeing all of the various different other things that I actually do. So it's like, wow, yeah, he's not just a subject matter expert related to the Underground Railroad, but he does a lot of other different things. He's also a human rights commissioner in his city, you know, an educator. He's a writer. He does all of these other different things. So, you know, I've gotten a lot of opportunities, and that is part of it with the Enslaved series with Samuel L. Jackson. But also I worked on an IMAX film called Into America's Wild that's narrated by Morgan Freeman. So they also checked out my content and saw my online presence with the various different things that I do and reached out to me in regards to being involved in that project as well. And, you know, these kind of opportunities go all the way back years ago when I worked as a program consultant for the History Channel, and they were doing an episode about the Hidden Valley Kings in Charlotte, North Carolina. And the producers reached out to me And this is way back, you know, when YouTube first started, you know, becoming popular, and they saw my content and reached out to me as a subject matter expert related to symbolism and what I do related to the 5%. And they reached out to me because they wanted some clarity on, is the 5% connected to the Hidden Valley Kings, because they use some similar symbolism that appears to be related to the 5%. Mm-hmm. So they consulted with me, and I clarified it like, no, no, we're not a gang, and that's not nothing that we're connected to. And the good thing about it is they made sure that they included that in that episode. Because if they didn't reach out to me or maybe other people that could have given them some clarity, they might have put any damn thing in an episode like that. And then it may even be more difficult today to get that security threat group label or that gang label off of who we actually are. Right. You know, so from there, like, I've also done consulting work with different celebrities and, you know, entertainers who've reached out to me because they want my advice or my insight on how to handle certain questions from the press, or if they're going to be speaking on a panel discussion, what is the best approach to address this particular topic or whatever. And it's like, you know, all of that came from just like my online presence and things that I was doing, and people seeing that I have a certain type of skill set that would be an asset to the things that they're actually doing. And I'm thankful for that, because a lot of times, for whatever reason, people may not be as willing to deal with advocating for one common cause like that type of social equality, you know. But when you look at like colored people or other different groups of people, they have no problem with having a think tank. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? And surrounding themselves with people that they can get advice from, and, you know, publicists or people that are consultants. You know, I've been doing that type of work for a while, you know, and, you know, I'm just thankful that some people see the value in what it is that I'll be doing, you know.
Indeed. With that, it's like, go ahead, Kay.
Let me ask you this. Speaking what you're saying, gives me two-part question. First part deals with what you was going with. Being in somewhat of a celebrity spotlight for certain people that's come to you, and when they ask you about the lessons dealing with the 5%, what are some of the negative connotations that you had to knock out in order to make sure that it goes the right direction instead of the wrong direction? Because you know how most sometimes come to you like the sheep, you know, they're the wolf, but they dressed up in sheep's clothing and want to talk to you like they for you, but then they waiting for you to say something, so they say, oh, well, he said this, that, and that. So as far as it goes with speaking on the 5% and dealing with this civilization that we dealing with, what are some of the negative factors that you had to deal with? Because I love the positive, but I think that if we give some small insights to some of the negative, so somebody else can say, well, you know what, that sounds like something I'm going through. So we can give insight to the youth, or somebody else is going through, maybe have some child tribulations that they can relate to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
That's the first part.
Okay. Yo, so one of the things that I encourage people to do is to not be so anxious to just answer people's questions about stuff, because you never know where somebody's coming from or why they asking you some shit. You know what I mean? Like, I've gotten visits from people who work for the government asking me certain questions about stuff. You know what I mean? And I've learned over time that when we talk about advocating for one common cause, you have to be very clear on where a person is coming from before you are willing to answer their actual question. So, for example, if somebody just come up to me asking me, like, out of the blue or whatever, like, oh, are you a 5%er? I'm gonna be like, well, what do you mean by that? Like, what were you asking me that for? Or what would inspire you to ask me a question like that? Or what do you mean? Because I need some clarity on what it is that they asking me. You know, they may respond and say, yeah, because my brother, yeah, he just went to the mosque and you know, he said that he's a 5% or stuff like that. So if I would have just answered that and said, yeah, they might be lumping me in a group with some people that is not doing what we doing. You know what I'm saying? So if they respond and say, yeah, my brother went to the mosque, this, that, and third, blah, blah, blah. Now I got another question for them. Like, oh, so he's a Muslim then, because we don't go to a mosque because we're not religious. We go wherever we want. But that's not something that is a part of our custom or our tradition, you know? So now I could clarify that. So now we can move on to the next step in terms of understanding. So that's one thing I learned. It's like, if you want to share understanding, you really have to meet people where they are. And the only way that you can know where people are is to really be clear on where they're coming from before you answer anything. You know, I was in a scenario one time where I seen his brother and he was building with somebody and he was excited about building with somebody. Like, yeah, the black man's God, you know, this, that, and the third, blah, 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 blah. And this person just sitting there nodding their head like that, listening to him. Like they really understanding and getting what he's saying. Soon as this brother walked away, that person that was standing there nodding their head walked over to somebody else and was like, oh yeah, he's an atheist. Like, that's what you got out of what he was saying. You know what I mean? And it's like, a lot of times we treat knowledge itself like it's a one-way street, when in reality it's more important to really do the knowledge first before you start wisdom in order for somebody to get an understanding. You know, so the negative things are usually unevolved experiences that some people have had with people who claim to be 5%ers, or that might be 5%ers, but they may have not understood why they did something a certain way. And let me give you an example about that. I've had people come up to me more than often talking about they want to study with me, and you know, they were building with somebody and they ain't teaching them right and all this other stuff. And I'm just sitting there listening like, yeah, okay. You know what I'm saying? And sometimes it's somebody I know that's right and exact. But they coming to me telling me about, yeah, they not teaching me, and I you know, this, that, and the third, and you know, they ain't reaching out to me and all this other stuff. And I can see the flaw in their thinking. Like, first of all, you need to reach out to them. They got knowledge of self. You need to go to them. You know what I'm saying? You expect them to run you down and chase you down, trying to give you something that they don't even know if you qualified or if you want it or not. You know what I'm saying? So sometimes the negative things that I've come in contact with is because of either exposure to somebody that wasn't right and exact, or a person that isn't developed enough yet or evolved enough yet to really see things for what it is. They haven't unlearned things yet in order for them to get a proper perspective of somebody. You know, but either way, I find myself more times than not redirecting people and striving to let them know, like, well, nah, that's not what we represent, you know, or you need to be more patient, and this is what this brother or this sister actually meant and why they did what they did. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, that's usually been my experience, you know, but for the most part, I strive to just demonstrate what this culture is by being a lord of whatever world that I'm in, so that my light travels much faster than sound. So I ain't got to do a whole bunch of explaining and all this other stuff to people. Like, I'm showing you what this is about. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Now, my second part to going back, dealing with the gifted and the youth as a trained. One of the things that I found that was one of my greatest tools educating, and it still is, no matter what, is when you're dealing with a lot of youth, not just the babies, but even the teens. If people come up to me, yo, man, I'm trying to get myself together, boom, boom, boom. One of the things I direct them to is a book way back when by Dr. Jaquanza Kumjufo, which is countering the conspiracy to destroy Black boys. I know, you know, that book right there, when I was a kid, was such a powerful thing. And that I remember getting it. I said, if I ever got a hold of it, this is what one of the first things I even applied to when teaching lessons to certain people. I said, listen, this is what I want you to study on. I want you to look at this right here and there. I'm going to give you one of the phrases, one of the quotes that he said, and I want you to elaborate on it.
Mm-hmm.
Doc says, solving the problems of Black boys may eliminate the problems of future men.
Mm. Mm.
That's deep.
Damn. Yo, that's yo. Yeah. Yeah, G. Yeah. Now if I'm relating that quote to something from like our cultural context, it makes me think about the phrase knowledge and understanding is one and the same.
Okay.
That the foundation that you establish is going to be seen for what it is ultimately. And how you set that foundation is going to set the precedence for what you're eventually going to see. You know what I mean? G, when you said that you was exposed to that book, what physical degree were you when you were reading that?
I would say I was about knowledge culture, between knowledge culture, knowledge understanding, knowledge culture in that time frame.
Damn.
But you mean as far as me and as a youth being exposed?
Yeah.
His teachers go back to the 70s. His teachers go back to the 70s when he was teaching in the university. So it was when I got exposed to it is by way of family members who was like in the education field, and they see me sometimes have my knucklehead actions and stuff. So one was sitting me down and said, listen, I want to talk to you straight up and down. I said, this is something I want you to do for me. He gave me the book. He said, I just want you to read a couple of things in this book and then come back to me and we're going to talk to it. So that's how I wound up exposed with it. And it helped me as to reflect of when I started getting knowledge of self in the 80s. And I was like, man, so I wound up going back to that book, looking at certain things as I'm seeing other things unfold around me. Now it's like my third eye is open to other aspects that were closed because I had that one-minded or one-sided insight. Now it's like, I'm like, oh, wow. So understanding and relating this book into the math, into the lessons, as Father, saying, when you teach the babies, you got to come right and exact. So you got to know what you're talking about before you can say anything. That's one thing we do. We research, we study, we find the facts. We don't just go off of the hearsay, and we don't trust the face value. We deal with the facts, and we get them facts straight, and we prove them facts with solid information to back those facts up. The truth can't be disputed. Even though you're going to have somebody doing it all the time, but you can take that and go and do what you do proudly. And that's one of the things that I see with you with Atlantis Bill, because when I was reading a couple of articles on you, and just like Garson, when we go to YouTube, I pull up some of your cartoon joints, and I'm sitting there like, that's cool. I love it. And I think about it, the instructions, the instructions that you're giving is that it makes people want to know why. So we, which is today's degree, why. We want to know the questions we want to ask, the who, when, where, why. So the qualifications for God to answer it, you don't apply that in what you do. So again, this is how I co-relate when I see the things as we talking. And I say, I got to bring this made mention because it's a beautiful thing. And for anybody, go grab books, study these books, especially on the knowledge about ourselves and everything. And just, to the youth, get right. Because, we living in these times, and if you ain't got knowledge yourself, and I'm not just talking about our knowledge, if you don't have a knowledge and concept of who you are, you will always be fooled by what you're not and by who you're not, because they're going to come and tell you who you are like they've been doing for years. Know who you are. Find out who you are. It ain't hard. The research is there. The knowledge is there, So I just want all the youth to grab that, man. And again, if you ever in the area, children, if y'all ever in the area, please go visit the Atlantis Bill, and give the God some love and show them and ask them any questions. I guarantee you get good answers.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
Peace, God.
Yo, yo,
But
G, and the like you being at that physical degree and being exposed to something at that age from somebody that shared it with you. I got exposed to Dr. Jawanza Kenjufu when I was about knowledge equality, and it was through an educator, a teacher at school who was also a AME minister, and he took a group of us boys to go see him speak. That's how I got exposed to him. He also took us to go see Dick Gregory. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I had the same type of people in addition to my parents that would expose us to different things. And one thing that's a little different about the present generation that's growing up is they may not have a Dr. Jawanza Kenjufu book or that type of exposure around them. You know, it's a different kind of landscape that they're growing up in, which means we have to be adaptable and swift and changeable when it comes to how we can reach them in the spaces where we find them at. You know what I'm saying? Even just with their lifestyle, a lot of them are more sedentary now, where they're not as active in terms of being outside or being on the corners and shit like that. Like you got to find some very creative ways in order to reach them. You know what I'm saying? And you know that really just shows and proves just the vision of the father in terms of why he invested in the youth to begin with, because that's the key to sustainability. You know, if you're connected with the youth, then they have much more of an opportunity to live a lifespan with knowledge of self, as opposed to getting it later on in age or something like that, where the majority of their life was already lived without knowledge of self. You know?
I think we got like maybe like 5-10 minutes left in the show.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I know it went by quick. But I
Yeah.
wanted to touch on your experience with running for local government. People don't realize like you ran for public office.
Yeah.
And with knowledge of self and running for public office, how was your experience with running for public office?
Yeah, I'm gonna tell you something, G. When you have knowledge of self,
Mhm.
you bring that into any and everything that you involve yourself in, any industry, any space, and you excel in it, period. There's no question about that, because you don't have those average doubts that the 85% would actually have. You go into it with the mindset of supreme elevation, period. You know what I mean? So back in Wisdom Cipher Knowledge Understanding, I ran for county legislature. And that experience is I had an opportunity to see the political process and just the political landscape through a lens that I was an outsider on prior to running for public office. So I learned about a lot of the logistics. I learned about the way that things move and how things operate. And I also learned about dynamics of power, because that's what politics actually is. Politics is a position that public officials have in terms of influencing the resources, the institutions, and the overall economy where you live. And the laws that they craft literally shapes the landscape where you live. And oftentimes you have lobby groups or people who help pay for these laws being crafted, which are going to shift the landscape. And if you are from a community that's marginalized or a community that doesn't have a voice, usually that landscape is not going to shift in your favor. You know, so that bill degree, which I've referred to quite a few times in this bill that we're dealing with right now, in terms of advocating for one common cause and dealing with that form of social equality, I learned about social economic equality and how it's important to put yourself in a position where you could affect change on a local and a regional level, because that is where you're most effective when it comes to the political landscape where you live. You look at the father and the relationship that he had with Mayor Lindsay, he was also doing the exact same thing. He didn't run for political office, but he was involved in politics
Right.
because he was literally shaping the landscape where he lived. And I strive to do the exact same thing where I actually live at. So one thing that I learned is people say deals are made behind closed doors.
Mhm.
Well, actually, deals are usually made on a golf course. They're made in these other different spaces where they keep you apart from their social equality.
Mhm.
And then they dress it up and do the shit behind closed doors.
Right.
Then they share it publicly, but those deals have already been made a long time ago. You know, I also learned about the importance of the born degree in the 1 of 14s in terms of the sword being an emblem of justice and used and keeping it above people's head. So they could keep in mind at any time they do some more other shit, they hit it when we take it off by the sword. Some people, you only can keep them in order through might, not necessarily what's right. And you got to use a sword in order to keep their asses in check.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? So it's a lot of different things that I learned from that experience. And once you get involved in public office, you can't unlearn or not be political anymore because now you're connected and you've been exposed to too much. So since that time, I've consistently been involved in like the political landscape where I live in terms of helping people get elected to certain positions, working on certain campaigns. And I'm now an appointed human rights commissioner for my city as well. So, you know, I just always strive to be involved, and doing it in the name of Allah too is vitally important, because you going into these uncharted territories and into these spaces that people have never seen a 5%er before. You're showing people in terms of help that you have the capacity to and properly represent who you are without compromising your culture or your integrity.
Well, Lord,
You know, so
I think we have run over a little bit of our time, but we're gonna have to do a part 2 with you, Saldin, to make sure that we get everything intact. But I enjoyed this build today, and would love to welcome you back on so we can finish having this type build.
no doubt.
For all our audience and all our listeners, you've been blessed today with the God Saldin Law. I am Joshua Law with my brother, the mighty K Wise. We sign up to say peace. With you, Saldin, to make sure that we get everything intact. I enjoyed this build today, and we'd love to welcome you back on so we can finish out this type build.
Peace and blessings.
All our audience and all our listeners.
Matter of fact, y'all stay tuned. We gonna keep rolling.
I am Joshua.
And we gonna add on.